After a tremendous 2012 that saw CM Punk hold the WWE Championship for over a year, become the workhorse of the company and having exciting performances, it was all coming to an end. Punk's reputation in the company was clear for the audience. He was number 2 behind John Cena, and whoever was number 3 was far, far, far down below. Of course, when it came time for WrestleMania season, that's a different story. Punk increased his value so greatly when compared to others, and at times it seems crazy that somebody like him was so far up. The higher-ups saw the value in Punk. They knew he was good, he can carry a program, main event shows, but they weren't on the same page because Punk wanted to go a little higher. That spot right next to John Cena, he felt that's where he belonged. A man that main evented WrestleManias was booked as the number 1 guy. Because while Punk did hold the title for over a year, he main evented one show in the 9 months of his title run. With WrestleMania coming up, Punk was tired. Not because of the booking, but because he was exhausted. Of course, it bugged him that the WrestleMania 29 main event didn't involve him, but that wasn't his biggest worry at this point. Punk goes out there, he's injured, but he puts on a classic with The Undertaker. One of the best streak matches, and that's saying something. But the match and the night itself wasn't all that positive for CM Punk. I went out there and I stole the show, but this time it was different because they were like, wow, you really should have went on last. And I got so mad and I said, you better unpay me like I did. If you pay me like I did, I got no problem. They did not pay me like I did. They did not give me what I thought I should have made. But I wrestled that match like I had a death wish. People can go back and watch it. I've never ever watched it. I got into a huge screaming match with Vince about that because he's like, did you watch it back yet? I was like, no. Why? Damn it. You should be proud of that. I was like, I was there, pay me. That was my attitude. So I tore up my other knee super bad. Strained ACL, torn MCL, torn meniscus, torn PCL. A while later, Punk walks out to go on hiatus. The WWE didn't really need him because Brock was around and John Cena was champion, and initially he was supposed to go away until Summerslam. His knee was injured, add to that he was burnt out, then a couple of weeks later he's enjoying his break, getting in some jiu-jitsu sessions with the Gracie camp, which he admits were just a way to have fun riding on jet skis, and then Punk calls Joey Mercury and tells him that he's going to test out his knee down in NXT. And his belief is that talking to Mercury, his friend, got him to return early because a while later he gets a phone call and it's his favorite guy. Punk believes that Joey Mercury stooged him out and Vince is making plans. I don't know if Joey stooged it off, but all of a sudden I'm driving down there from Destin to Tampa and I get a phone call from Vince. How you feeling? Oh, I'm alright. Like, I'd been doing some jiu-jitsu all week and my knee's it feels weak, you know. I feel like I should be wrapping it up, but I'm not because I want to try to strengthen it. Great, I want you back for I don't know if it was June or July for the pay-per-view because it was in Chicago, and I went, no, I don't want to come back until SummerSlam. He said, well, I need you back. This is Chicago, so I need you. It's not sold out yet, so we put you on. It will sell out, and we want you to work with Chris Jericho. I worked Jericho enough, so I was like, I think I'll come back for SummerSlam. Well, no. Here's what we do. And he lays out like the summer plans for me. It's me and Jericho, then I'm in Money in the Bank, which I also refused to do. I didn't want to do it. Paul Heyman would turn on me, and then I would feud with Paul, but he would bring in Brock, and then this. Of course, you know where this is going. And then he's like, I need you and Brock for SummerSlam, a big headline match. I was like, great. And ladies and gentlemen, wrestling is fake, and it doesn't really matter in a lot of senses who wins and who loses, but put yourself in my shoes. That's fine and all, but for now, let's focus on CM Punk on screen. On the May 27, 2013 episode of Raw, Chris Jericho hosted the highlight reel. He wanted to talk to Paul Heyman about his guy, and he wasn't referring to Curtis Axel or Brock Lesnar. He was talking about CM Punk. Jericho showed a clip of Punk walking out, and Y2J felt that Heyman was shocked over his client walking out. He's talking about a whole other topic, and Jericho wanted to know simply, where is CM Punk? Heyman promised that he'll make an announcement regarding the best in the world, and for Jericho, he wasn't there because he had been sitting down at home for 6 weeks, doing nothing. It's not like he's injured, it's not like he's hurt, none of that. He's just sitting at home, he lost, he felt embarrassed. Heyman mentioned Punk at home watching, and Jericho talked about the next pay-per-view, which was in Chicago. He challenged Punk, saying that if he lost to The Undertaker, lost his mind, and still calls himself the best in the world, then he's insane. Heyman was trying to shut up Jericho, who was calling himself the best, and on behalf of Punk, Heyman accepted the challenge. In the lead up to Payback, CM Punk didn't make any appearances. Jericho, though, promised Punk that he will get him his best because he needs to win. For CM Punk, this was a very welcoming return. The crowd was going insane before he even came out, and when he did, he was donning a different look. Someone looked like the Wolverine. With this atmosphere and 2 motivated talents, this was a classic, and I'm not throwing that around as nothing, because this was really one of WWE's best matches in 2013. Both men were at the top of their game, and it's arguably their best match together, because it was simple. They ring the bell, they just go. There was no DQ thing, no stipulation, none of that. They just went out there and had a great match. That's what makes it so good, because it's so simple. And after this, there was no way Punk could go back to being a heel. They hadn't cheered him this loud in over a year, and I should mention that he emerged victorious. Otherwise, what's the point of him trying to regain his confidence and losing in his first match? However, it was close as Heyman interfered. So Punk called him out on this and said that he didn't want Heyman at ringside or as his client. Paul Heyman didn't want this to ruin the relationship though and was like, okay. Later that night after Punk's match with Alberto Del Rio, Brock Lesnar made his return. After a little moment, Lesnar dropped him with an F5 until the build to SummerSlam begins. Later that week, Heyman finally addressed the events of last week. CM Punk felt that it was odd that Heyman didn't know such a thing about him getting an F5. He was very suspicious over Heyman and Lesnar's relationship because Heyman has a history of screwing others over, so why would he become a Paul Heyman guy despite all these things? He talked about his past and how Paul Heyman was a believer of his. But back to Brock Lesnar. Punk said that he isn't better than him and called himself the best in the world. He was telling Heyman straight up because Lesnar didn't have the balls to show up, and no matter what Heyman did in the past, he's never wronged him personally. But he asked him, did you know Lesnar was coming out to the ring? Whatever you did, just tell the truth. Punk was a man who truly didn't want to believe that his best friend lied to him, but he was willing to accept it if he was honest. Heyman swore on his children that he didn't know Lesnar was going to be there, and he mentioned that this was the same reaction the McMahons would have when he called Punk a WrestleMania main eventer. If anything, he picked the fight when he said Lesnar needed Paul Heyman's help. That's why he took the F5. He also said there's a reason why he's never pitched a Brock Lesnar and CM Punk tag team, even if it's for one night only. Why? Because there's professional jealousy. Heyman talked about CM Punk being the WrestleMania main event, being his dream, and even said that he loved him. So why would he ruin their friendship over a little thing? Even if CM Punk faced Brock Lesnar, he wouldn't represent someone going against him. So now, it's Punk's move. After some consideration, he apologized. All was good until Money in the Bank. During the match, Curtis Axel came out and took a GTS, leading to Heyman appearing. Punk has the match. He's about to become a 3-time Money in the Bank winner when Heyman broke his back and turned on him. Heyman once again shows in kayfabe that he's one of the slimiest, most intelligent heels, and the partnership between the two was over. The next night on Raw, broken and battered CM Punk came out to address the events of Money in the Bank. He called them out immediately, and there was Paul Heyman alone. He said that in his world, CM Punk doesn't exist. In 2005, nobody's seen anything in him except for one person, Paul Heyman. He was working hard for his career, and then they made it to the top together. And the reason why Paul Heyman turned on CM Punk wasn't simple. It's because Punk failed them when he couldn't defeat The Undertaker. He returns and suddenly thinks he's better than him. And it wasn't no CM Punk dumping Paul Heyman. It was Paul Heyman dumping CM Punk. And after he made it personal, Paul was set to make it as personal as it could get. He then said that Punk has no family, no parents, no wife, no children, and all he has is the fans. Punk was intense, all while the crowd were chanting his name. Heyman said that all Punk wanted was the title, and when he took his best friend away, he took the WWE title away. In business, he's bad, but personally, that's a different story. His kids helped him see it well, and the harshest truth of them all, Paul Heyman said that he betrayed CM Punk because he can't beat Brock Lesnar. Punk admitted that he should have seen it, but he didn't. He said that Heyman knows him well, and that's when he wants something, he becomes the most relentless person until he gets it. And he swore on Heyman's kids that he will get everyone that conspired against him. He'll rip apart anyone that tries to get in between them, and Punk said that Heyman didn't have a future. He's going to burn everything around him until he's the last man standing, and then he'll hurt him the most. He even called him an SOB and asked, am I lying? Heyman said that if Punk was to say he has a lack of a future, well, here's Brock Lesnar. Heyman goes for a cheap shot and the brawl was on. Punk was going all out, but Brock Lesnar, he's Brock Lesnar. You guys know this. This guy's a beast. Fans tried cheering and rallying him on, but it wasn't to be as Lesnar F5'd him on the announce table. Okay, I love this segment. Punk went from emotionally hurt to emotionally aggressive. Heyman's selfish desires such as the streak ending didn't happen and considered Punk to be a loser, and to make matters worse, he cut him off as a client, which basically meant he cut him off personally. On this attack, Punk said that even if he got beaten, he's still up. Sure, he could take a beating, but he couldn't be kept down. Despite Lesnar's ability, his biggest weapon is fear. Punk said that he wasn't scared of him, and about Paul Heyman, he made the wrong decision. He said that monsters have been put in his direction to be slaughtered, and Punk made the challenge. He wanted him at Summerslam. He wanted the beast versus the best. Now, Heyman wasn't in the arena, but accepted the challenge. At one point, CM Punk almost got his hands on Heyman, but Axel put a stop to it, and this leads to a match between the two. And while Punk did give him an ass-kicking, Brock Lesnar came out. Punk was ready for a fight, and this time he got more shots in, but his hatred of Paul Heyman cost him. Lesnar couldn't understand, thinking to himself, like, this is the best that the world has to offer? He's the best in the world? And he asked Paul Heyman to say something stupid. Iconic. Heyman said that Punk might not make it to SummerSlam because he's going to walk out to the ring and fight him. Of course, when this match happened, Brock Lesnar was here. Heyman was very confident that Punk wasn't going to do such a thing because Lesnar was here. Punk did appear but from behind, and this gave him the advantage. He finally dropped Lesnar and even got some shots into Heyman, showing that maybe, just maybe, he was going to beat Lesnar at SummerSlam. Okay, their match at SummerSlam was tremendous. Some people actually consider it to be WWE's match of the year. Why? Because it had some superb storytelling. For the doubt Heyman had over Punk's ability, he was slowly changing it. The match was once again the Brock Lesnar special. He's got the size of what the little guy makes everyone believe. Punk was constantly on the attack and forcing Lesnar to make mistakes. He was countering the F5, locking in holds, and the big Brock Lesnar was even considering tapping out. Even now watching it, you believe Punk has a chance, because they did a sublime job of telling the story. It took Paul Heyman interfering, and even then Punk countered the F5 into a DDT, and once again, Heyman interfered, and it was Punk's hatred of him that cost him the match, because Lesnar delivered several chair shots and even hit the F5 on top of the chair to win it. Damn! He lost, but this man had more protection than Beyonce. They made you believe that he had a chance, and not just any. It was the closest match in Lesnar's run, probably. He was pushed to the limit and was going to lose if it wasn't for Heyman in storyline. It's easily one of the best matches of 2013. Now, Punk did kind of get upset by losing to Lesnar, but it didn't hurt him at all. This man was number 2, number 3 in the company, and him losing to Lesnar was not a bad thing at all. The next night on Raw, Paul Heyman said that it's time to end this family feud. He forgave Punk, and the moment he apologizes, he'll take him back. Punk, though, wasn't in the mood. He challenged some guy who was talking bad about him. And about Paul Heyman, if an apology gets him the WWE title in the WrestleMania main event, then he should come out, because maybe he gets what he wants. And there he is. Punk told him straight up that he's going to get his revenge and told him to step into the ring and fight like a man. Heyman admitted that he should apologize, and he did. Why? Because he apologized for what is about to happen, and he told Curtis Axel to tape up his hands for a fight. After the commercial, Punk's rage overwhelmed Axel, and while he did almost get his leg stepped on, he fought back and hit the GTS on the steps. Unfortunately, though, he saw the rough side of Curtis Axel the following week, and this gave way to Heyman beating him up with a kendo stick. Heyman was constantly shouting that Punk broke his heart, and it got to the point where CM Punk demanded a match with him. So Brad Maddox booked a handicap elimination match. If Heyman runs away, he'll be gone. Seeing as there was basically no way out of this match, Heyman feigned a knee injury, and out of all the places he did this, he did it in the middle of the ring with his doctor. The WWE doctor thought he was fine, which I find ironic if you know Punk's story from 2013. And Heyman was like MJ. He took it personally. All of a sudden, CM Punk came out and he ran like he was going for a kick return. And in an effort to cancel the match, Heyman begged Triple H to do what's best for business, and it also didn't help that the match was no disqualification. Triple H assured him that he didn't really need to worry and said that he's got Curtis Axel. He tried talking for him, but he only got himself a title match because it was Night of Champions. But about the match, yes, Paul Heyman got his. But out of everyone to save him, it wasn't Curtis Axel, it was Ryback. And once again, Punk's attention towards Heyman cost him the match. So now the feud continues, and not only that, but Punk's real-life rival, Ryback, was involved. For Paul Heyman, this was something they could brag about endlessly. The only time they face off, and he's the winner. Even then, Heyman felt he was very lucky to have taken the beating from Punk and won, and he owed it to Ryback. Ryback called CM Punk a bully for what he did to Paul Heyman, and he straight up said that he didn't like him and was here to stop him. With the Raw in Chicago, CM Punk finally made his return. The crowd has always went wild. CM Punk in Chicago. What do you expect? He was in a bad mood, but the fans lifted him up. And one of the reasons he hasn't been happy about letting the fans down is, of course, because of his loss to Paul Heyman. He didn't deserve to say he's from Chicago after losing, but the crowd, once again, they helped him back up. Punk likened his situation to the Chicago Blackhawks making a comeback against the Red Wings in May. He said that that's the Chicago way, and sure, we lose, but we don't let it keep us down. And that's how Punk felt. He was 3-1 down, and he was going to fight and make a comeback. Paul Heyman, though, came out, and he said that he could save that he beat CM Punk, and it's not something Punk should feel sorry about, because he's from Chicago, which is filled with everything second place. And this makes him the second best in the world. Punk was ready to go after him, even if it's for only 2 seconds. That didn't really work, because there was Ryback and Curtis Axel. Punk did put up a fight, but it was outnumbered, and Ryback dropped him through a table before saying this is what happens to bullies. Okay, this moment in itself is very important, Punk's decision towards leaving WWE, because as you can see here, Ryback dropped a part of him on the concrete floor, injuring his pelvis. I'll work Ryback, and I go up to Ryan and I go, hey man, clean slate, let's fucking kill this, let's show them that you're better than they think you are. Let's show them that I'm better than they think I am, and let's turn this mid-card into a main event. Yeah, I'm really excited, great, blah, blah, blah. First night out, gorilla press through a table, and misses the table, dumps me on the concrete floor, ground, tilts me on my pelvis, me up for weeks. The following week, CM Punk was ready to return the favor when he tripped on his knee. He's down. He's hurt, and I guess he did some L1R2 cheat code to bring out a kendo stick, and he goes after them. I don't know if anyone's going to say their favorite genre is Punk beating Heyman with a kendo stick. One thing for sure is that we've seen it a lot at this point. He drops Axel and sends a message to Ryback. Okay, their match at Battleground was it. The finish saw CM Punk low blow Ryback after Heyman brought out a kendo stick, and it's very odd to see Punk, a babyface, cheating the way he did without even hitting a finisher. But this feud was finally slowing down, and it had gone on for over 3 months, and I would say the heat was gone, but the crowds are going crazy for Punk whenever he'd fight back. Paul Heyman called CM Punk a cheater and asked Brad Maddox to make him choose a stipulation for the Hell in a Cell match. He wanted a handicap match inside the cell. Maddox preferred Beat the Clock, Ryback versus Truth, and CM Punk versus Curtis Axel. If Ryback beats the clock, Heyman gets to choose the stipulation. If CM Punk wins, he gets to choose the stipulation himself. Ryback set the time at 5 minutes and 44 seconds. Punk managed to beat Axel with only 11 seconds and Heyman was livid. CM Punk was more than excited and announced that it was going to be himself against Paul Heyman and Ryback inside Hell in a Cell. On the final Raw before Hell in a Cell, CM Punk spoke about his match with Ryback and Paul Heyman. He said that he's going to be the devil and he won't stop at nothing until he gets what he wants. He said that 3 men walk into that structure and 1 will walk on his own. And that will be him. Their match at Hell in a Cell did end the feud. It wasn't that good, but from a storyline standpoint, it provided a decent ending to the Paul Heyman feud. Punk won and afterwards hit the GTS on Heyman at the top of the cell, and other than a quick-ass brawl with Ryback the next night, the feud was over. Alright, this one lasted a lot more than it should have. It should have ended at Summerslam because after that, it was just like, it was getting slowly worse and worse. It dragged on far more than it should have. That said, the promos were good, so that's a positive. Now, as I said, CM Punk faced Ryback the next night. He won the match, of course, and afterwards, the Wyatt family came out. Punk stood his ground, and even though the 3 men had the advantage, he showed no fear. They went after him, and Wyatt hit the sister Abigail, and Punk found somebody who went through an attack similar to him, Daniel Bryan. For Punk and Bryan, they were both on the same page. They agreed with everything and felt confident that they could take down the Wyatt family. They even called themselves the Beard and the Best. Wyatt, on the other hand, was jealous of Bryan and Punk's status. He hated that fans stare at them as if they were some superheroes. It was like, oh, they're men. He wanted to take them down so others could shut up. Both teams were involved in some awesome tag team matches with the Shield, the Rhodes Brothers, and of course, the Usos. Some matches were hidden gems. As for Survivor Series, it was Punk's best pay-per-view match since SummerSlam. Rowan and Harper provided the babyfaces a tough challenge, but it ended with Punk and Bryan standing tall. While Punk was very busy with the Wyatt family, the Shield made Punk look in their direction. After the Wyatts got DQ'd in the handicap match, they took Daniel Bryan. Punk's in the middle of the ring, and he suddenly runs into a spear from Roman Reigns. On this attack, CM Punk didn't see it being the Shield. He thought it was from a figure of authority. He reiterated the statement on Raw, saying he just said that Triple H lacked creativity and he's attacked by the Shield. He even questioned whether or not Triple H was dense and trying to provoke him. But if he was right, Punk called him stupid and ignorant. And there's Stephanie McMahon. She said that Punk knows that there's no bigger advocate of free speech than her family. I mean, her husband was in DX. So why would the Shield attack Punk over a bad name? Stephanie even claimed that they were upset when the Shield attacked him. And she brought out Kane to solve Punk's problem. He said that the investigation had been concluded and the authority had nothing to do with the Shield's attack. So this issue has been resolved. Since Kane sold out, Punk said that he could get knocked out. The Shield, though, once they heard this, came out. Punk, though, wasn't stupid as he brought in a chair. Stephanie put a stop to this and said that Punk should be respected and admired. Kane then booked him in a handicap match against the Shield at TLC. Later that week, Punk had that embarrassing match against Dean Ambrose where he did something in the ring. There was even a stain in the ring, and one thing to note is that Punk's ribs were hurting. His injuries were really showing here, and he tweeted out on Twitter, "This poop ain't fun anymore." December in general was an odd month for Punk. At the time, nobody expected him to leave, but the signs were there. Figure 4 Wrestling Online reported that his match with Lesnar wasn't nominated for a Slammy because he couldn't be seen as having a better match than Triple H, Punk's match with Lesnar was obviously better than the ones Triple H had earlier in the year. Wrestling Observer newsletter reported Punk got some heat for tweeting about hockey instead of something that relates to TLC, and this in itself is pretty funny to me. It'd be like one of you guys getting pissed at me for talking about Conte and Tuchel's fight on Twitter. Then he tweeted these things, and of course this one, "I'm sick of traveling." The Wrestling Observer reported in January of 2014, regarding CM Punk's recent tweets where he seems to be giving the impression that he's frustrated and tired of traveling, the feeling within WWE is that Punk always talks about leaving when he gets frustrated. Regardless, WWE doesn't seem to think Punk is leaving the company at any point in the near future. Punk's deteriorating interest in WWE is not obvious to anyone. I mean, when you're watching him feud with the Shield, you wouldn't see such a thing. Anyways, Punk's issues with the authority were clear as day, from both sides as well. During the championship summit, or whatever the hell it was called, between John Cena and Randy Orton, about every world champion contracted to WWE was in the ring. It was one hell of a segment. Punk was being pushed away by Orton before Triple H intervened and shoved him, and Punk being Punk went after him before taking a sweet chin music, and it was an awesome segment. There was teases, an amazing crowd who was cheering for Daniel Bryan despite the situation, and of course, a brawl. The match at TLC was surprising. For one, they kicked off the show. This was because Punk was supposed to attend a wedding of a friend, so he had to go with AJ from Houston all the way to California. Despite this, the match was good and showed maybe the Shield had some problems of their own to solve. Punk shockingly won, which was odd. as the Shield usually beat everyone in tag matches, and here they were losing to one man. Of course, Punk had to make Roman look strong, which was uttered more than medical facility by those in the back to Punk. The next night on Raw, Punk was back. How? I don't know, man, it was crazy. Punk said that the intriguing thing about the Shield trying to put him down is the thought of how many of them he was going to take with him. He didn't really think he was going to win the match, but he miraculously took them down. Even though Punk won, he still felt somebody was trying to sweep him under the rug and make him go away. He was of course talking about Triple H. He was waiting for him to come out, but it ended up being Shawn Michaels. Even then, Punk asked that whenever Hunter, scratch that, Stephanie wants to talk, he's here. As for Shawn Michaels, he said that Punk's problems should be with the super kick. One more match intensifies and Punk tells everyone that he's got a couple of more than that. Punk admitted that he could look past this kick, but if he tries it again, he's going to kick him back. Shawn Michaels said that he always liked him and kicking him hurt. Then he said that this would hurt even more, and he introduced the Shield as Punk's opponents. The match is nice as expected, but Punk finally lost the Shield. Roman pinned him, and the feud continued. Punk's battle against the Shield led to John Cena and Big E getting involved, and this of course meant ass-kickings were on the menu for the heels. On the December 30th, 2013 episode of Raw, CM Punk reflected on his year. Despite not following up on an incredible 2012, he saw some positives. 2013, though, to him was the year of the Shield, and he decided he wanted to make a challenge, one-on-one, to the best member of the Shield. Dean Ambrose stepped up, but Punk's like, I've beaten you like 6 times, and called him the weak link of the Shield. He then asked if Roman's the man in the Shield before Rollins jumped in and called himself the best member. Punk was confused. He's like, I've been hearing about Roman Reigns the most. Roman Reigns this, Roman Reigns that. And then Brent Maddox came out and booked CM Punk and Seth Rollins. Once again, the Shield's drama cost him, and CM Punk scored the victory. Roman Reigns got his chance after a Piper's Pit segment, and you could see how much they loved Roman, because after a little distraction from Ambrose, he speared him to win. Punk, though, with the help of the New Age Outlaws and Jake the Snake, stood tall a couple of minutes later. The Outlaws, though, ended up being Triple H's buddies, and they abandoned Punk in the tag match the following week. On the whole situation, CM Punk knew that it was stupid to call out 5 men, but he was doing it anyways. He said that Triple H lucked into his position of power and he steps on anyone to feed his ego. He said that Triple H hides behind his wife, he hides behind the Shield, and there they were. Kane, though, put a stop to this and said that the Authority want Punk to main event WrestleMania. That's why he's in the Royal Rumble, and they told Kane to make sure that Punk's treated right and with respect. Kane assured him this, and Punk said that his word is nothing. This led to Kane asking them to go after Punk, and this time, he got involved and chokeslammed him. After Kane's conduct on Raw, Stephanie McMahon demanded he make an apology. Kane did that forcefully, and Punk was going to make him do it twice. He's like, I didn't hear you. He then apologized before attacking. Brad Maddox came out and booked him against Billy Gunn. He wins, and Kane makes him the #1 entrant in the Royal Rumble. For Punk, this was no problem. He saw this as something that could motivate him, and he was focused. Kane thought Punk had such a small chance, but being the best in the world would increase his chance just a little. Punk said that it was sad that Kane has become the Authority's guy. He hands in his mask and suddenly loses his manhood. He said that the first entrant in the Rumble has won it before, and he's the best in the world, so he's going to do it again. Before the Royal Rumble, CM Punk seemed doubtful about his future, telling Ariel Helwani he's not sure if he's renewing his contract after July. About the Rumble, Punk put in a performance. He lasted all the way to the final 4 before Kane interfered and eliminated him before hitting the chokeslam through the announce table. This was the final time we saw Punk in WWE. For Punk, him leaving is for a multitude of reasons. He was injured so often, he hated traveling and was exhausted. He had to wrestle with injuries and of course the backstage politics. The pay wasn't helping as well. Punk was told that he was a top guy, yet his checks were on par with what he was making in the past. The day after the Rumble was even worse in terms of stress. Punk won this staph infection off his back. They're talking about concussions, piss tests, and we're asking him to sign something for a tour. And he's like, I'm going to talk to Vince. And then I just went, you know what, Vince, I need to talk to you. And Hunter was in the room and he was like, I'll leave. And I was like, you know what, you can stay. I don't care. You need to hear this too. And I just looked Vince in the eye and I said, I do not love this anymore. I'm unsick. I'm unhurt. I'm unconfused. I don't know as a business what we're doing anymore. Every day you tell me that this is a team effort, but every day it's an individual effort by me to find what's necessary to even come here. It's not fun. I have zero passion for this. I'm concussed. I'm hurt. And all you care about is what segment I am and how soon I can get my gear on and when I could pee in this cup. And I don't want to do it anymore. And then I said, look, I thought when I re-signed 3 years ago, Vince, I told you if I couldn't be all that I could be, you should unfire me. That is if I was a fraud and I was anything less and fell short of the mark. I sold more shirts than John Cena until I turned heel for you, and you said you owed me one. I worked the guys that were dangerous, and you said you owed me one. I did all these things, and all I wanted was the main event of WrestleMania, and it's fine if you guys don't think that is me, and that I'm the caliber of a superstar, but then you need to unfire me, because I do not want to be here, and I do not want to be anything less. I will go somewhere else, and I'll get more and over because I know I can. You have shackled me, you have creatively stifled me, you have made this a very toxic environment. I no longer want to be here, and I said, it boggles my mind how Daniel Bryan has now figured into your plans to be in the main event of WrestleMania, because this is his year. Just like 2 years ago was my year, now it's white and hot, just like he is now. And what did you do? You fed me to this guy, and I pointed right at Hunter. And Vince was just like, this is the concussion talking. I can't believe you're saying any of this. You're in the main event. It is a main event. You're wrestling Triple H. And I turned to Hunter, and I said, all due respect, I do not need to wrestle you. You need to wrestle me. I do not want to wrestle you. I seriously resent you for not putting me over 3 years ago when you should have. That would have been best for business, but you had to come in and squash it. And then I had to lose to Untruth and Miz, and it didn't make any business sense then. It doesn't make any business sense now. Now I'm in a position now where I can tell you that I don't have to, nor do I want to wrestle you at WrestleMania. I don't care if I was supposed to win, which I was. I didn't care. I didn't want to give him the privilege. Do you understand that? Punk walks out. It's a big story, and it's like Seth Rollins walking out today. Vince suspends him for 2 months, and the suspension ends the day after WrestleMania. This is not officially announced, as McMahon said he was on sabbatical to investors, but for Punk, yes, he was suspended. A couple of weeks later, Meltzer's source, apparently a top wrestler, said that there was a 100% chance of Punk returning for the March 3rd, 2014 episode of Raw. The one in Chicago, of course. Everyone believed it. I think I believed it as well. And the expectation was for Punk to feature in the title match at WrestleMania 30, but that never happened, and Punk didn't return. At this point, Daniel Bryan won the title, and he had his title reign. Punk was at home in Chicago and had little to do with WWE. He was trying to cash in some royalty checks he had, but he didn't find much success. June comes up. WWE has the option to add time to his contract, as they did with Rey Mysterio, but they didn't. Triple H wanted to talk to him around this time, but Punk told him that he'll talk after his wedding in a couple of days. The topic of conversation is unknown. Probably has to do with Punk's release. 2 days later, FedEx overnight, the package is dated on the 12th, and it just so happened to be the 13th, which was Punk's wedding day. So he was fired on his wedding day. Then he got into it with the company over royalty checks and had the lawsuit with the WWE doctor, and it seemed very unlikely we'd see him back to wrestling. Okay, CM Punk's departure was always going to happen in my opinion. He had some issues with WWE that went deeper than the WrestleMania main event. Their outlook in general was always different to each other, and ever since Punk lost the title, he felt that he peaked. Not as a performer, but his status. 434 days as champion, a record in the modern era topped by only Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. All that was left was the main event of WrestleMania, and in his eyes, if they weren't going to give it to him in 2012 or 2013, he wasn't ever going to get it. That said, Figure 4 Wrestling Online reported in November of 2013, CM Punk was planning to face Randy Orton for the title at WrestleMania 30. With the way the card ended up, Orton did main event the show, and again, I have to say this, grain of salt, do not take this as 100% confirmation of anything, because plans change. These rumors sometimes end up being fake as well. Orton, I should note, never crossed paths with Punk in his title reign. I don't think they were even involved in a tag team match. Batista wasn't rumored to be returning until the end of the month, so Punk could have gotten that main event if Batista never even returned. But again, WWE changes their plans a lot, and from one perspective, it does seem likely that it happened, but again, this was before the time where they unified the titles and Batista was returning. Alright, with that said, CM Punk had a decent run here, but it was miserable for him. He was always hurt. However, that said, he didn't allow it to affect his performances inside and outside the ring, because while 2013 Punk isn't the peak version of himself, he still had some good matches and still had a sharp tongue, and the crowd was always reacting to him. Had he never left, for sure he would have won the title again. WWE went through a lot of times where their top guys like John Cena were either gone or injured. That's just speaking positively, because he was really banged up. Who knows? Like, this guy probably wouldn't even have survived 2014 had he continued. And another thing to mention is that I don't think he would have main evented WrestleMania even if he was healthy, because they were looking forward. The only way Punk main events is if he faced Roman Reigns, and they did some story with Punk calling out Reigns about being the company's guy. And then again, who knows? Alright, what do you guys think of CM Punk's run? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the Anaconda device on the like button, and perhaps the GTS on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.